What's interesting about that term in verse 12, he will certainly raise up a signal for the nations. It's the same term in the Hebrew and Greek text of Numbers 21:8. Nes and Simeon. Let's go to Numbers 21:8. This right here, raise up a signal for the nations that would gather the dispersed ones of Israel and Judah from the four extremities of the earth. This signal, this Nes, this Simeon, is described in Numbers 21:8. And look at what it says. Numbers 21:8 from the books of Moses. After the Hebrews who left Egypt with Moses rebelled against Jehovah, he sent snakes, serpents, to punish them. And then this is what he told Moses. Then Jehovah said to Moses, "Make for yourself a fiery snake and place it upon a signal pole, a sign, a Nes, a Simeon." That is what Moses put the serpent on. And in a Christian sense, and sometimes we debate whether Jesus was killed on a pole or a stake or a cross, not only do we have evidence, as I've shown in other videos, that show his feet were like this next to each other, likely, because the nails that we have from archaeology with other people who were killed that way, they're nailed to the base of the post from the side, not over each other, as is often wrongly shown in many Catholic and Protestant idols of Jesus being crucified. Here, it speaks about a snake being placed on a pole or a sign, a Nes, a signal. The signal that was spoken of in Isaiah 11:12, that the twig out of Jesse's line, the Messiah, according to the Aramaic Targum of the late 1st or 2nd century of the Jews, the signal that would be raised up for all the nations, that would gather Israel and Judah from the four extremities of the earth. Here, Jehovah tells Moses to make a serpent, a fiery serpent, and put it on the same signal or pole, Nes, Simeon, that is associated with the Messiah in Isaiah chapter 11. It says, make that serpent, right? And a serpent is not like this. It's not like a cross. It's like this, right? Probably straight up, not on a cross. And that becomes relevant in a moment, as you'll see when we get to the New Testament. But here, as you can see, Moses was told to put the snake, the fiery serpent, on a pole or a sign, something to which people could look up to. Because he says it must occur that when anyone has been bitten, he then has to look at it and so keep alive. So Moses at once made a serpent of copper and placed it upon the signal pole, the Nes, the Simeon. And it did occur that if a serpent had bitten a man and he gazed at the copper serpent, then he kept alive. And some have asked me, well, why would God tell the Israelites here to make an image and for people to look to it, when in the books of Moses, he tells them, according to the law, not to make a graven image or to bow down to it? And the answer is simple. We are not to make an image on our own and bow down to it, like the golden calf that they made after they crossed the Red Sea and bowed down to it. Jehovah did not tell them to make that calf. He told them to make this serpent. Because in putting it on the Nes, the Simeon, the signal pole, it prefigured the Messiah. Because not only is the exact same term used here that's used in Isaiah 11:12 in relation to the Messiah that would be raised up as a signal, the same way that this serpent was raised up as a signal. Not only are serpents directly associated with these spirit gods, you have Satan in the Garden of Eden, you have seraphs flying around Jehovah's head in Isaiah 6, flying fiery serpents. You have the dinosaurs, these gigantic reptilian serpent-like beings. Serpents are often associated with gods in other nations, like the Mayan god, Quetzalcoatl, I believe is the name. Other serpents, many serpent gods in many different nations throughout history, and again, even biblically with Satan and the seraphs. And here with the serpent that Jah told Moses to make, which Jesus in the New Testament applies directly to himself. Let's go to John chapter 3, and you can read it for yourself. So we have the same term, nes, Hebrew, semeon in Greek, used in Isaiah 11:12 for the signal that the twig from Jesse, the Messiah, Jewish Targum, translation of Isaiah 11:1 and 6, using the term Messiah, showing that that's what they accepted, according to this text in Isaiah 11:1 through 12, as it applying to the Messiah. The signal, the Messiah that would be raised up out of his glorious resting place for all the nations, Israel, Judah, to the four extremities of the earth. That same term also used in Numbers 21:8 and 9 for the serpent that would be looked to so that those who were bitten could be healed, according to Jesus, prefigured him. John 3:14 through 15. This is Jesus talking. And just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, that everyone believing in him may have everlasting life. What do people associate with Jesus? Him being lifted up and put to death. Right? They turn to him inquiringly for the teachings of his mouth, the rod of his mouth, the wise sayings from his mouth. A house divided against itself will not stand. It wasn't Abraham Lincoln that made that up. It was Jesus, the Messiah of the Bible. Abraham Lincoln just borrowed it. He has struck the earth with the rod of his mouth as the wisdom of God, according to the Christian view of him as that being wisdom in Proverbs 8, that is described as having been created before all things were made. That one right here talks about himself back there being lifted up, just as Moses lifted up the serpent on the pole, or signal, nes, semeon. Well, if a serpent is lifted up like this, then why couldn't the Son of Man be lifted up like this? With his hands out, or like this, nailed to each side of the pole, just like feet, according to archaeology and the evidence we have showing people who were executed on a pole, had their feet nailed from the side. That to me seems like a much more corresponding fulfillment from Jesus' own words, that he was lifted up just like the serpent was lifted up. It doesn't appear he's talking about a cross. Maybe he was. We really don't know. But what we do know is it was like being lifted up as Moses lifted up the serpent. It's like Isaiah 11:12 stated, the Messiah would be lifted up as a signal for all the nations and for Israel